Hello and welcome to another live broadcast. I'm Debra MacIntyre. I am a naturopath. I've been in practice for 25 years, founded a clinic in Roswell, Georgia. And because my specialties are chronic inflammation and fibromyalgia, I like to post frequently on these things. And so today, I want to talk to you about a factor that is lots of times overlooked, but super, super important in being able to heal from these conditions. And that factor is mold. Now, before you turn away and say, oh, I got no mold in my house, I want to show you some images of tests that we ran on people who thought they had no mold in their environment and how we were able to find it. It can be easy to treat. You don't have to have visions of thousands of dollars, dancing through your head. But it's important to know if that's there, because if it is, then it's going to work against you and you won't be able to heal. So I have to give my little disclaimer. I am a naturopath. I am not a medical doctor, so don't construe this as medical advice, but it is good advice. All right, so mold. I'm going to post some pictures in the comments because it's actually quite remarkable what can happen. Well, it's not going to let me post in the comments. Okay, I'll have to do this afterwards, I do believe. Let's see if I can copy and do it. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so when the stream is over, I will go ahead and post the pictures before and after. So in my practice, what I do is I use Petri dish tests. They look just like this, little Petri dish. There's a little bit of gel in the bottom of it. And I test to see if there's anything in the body, and I also test to see if there's anything on the clothes. So to check for the body, you just take a little Q-tip and you do it around in your nose, you flip it over and do the other Q-tip side with the other nostril, and then you just take it and you're going to smear it on the inside of the Petri dish where the little gel is. Then I have people hold that bottom plate up to their mouth and cough 3 good times into the plate. And then what you do is you cap it up, you wrap it in foil, so no light gets there, and then you let it sit for a few days. And when you open it up, you can see. Now, any fungus will grow in the plate. So if you have candida, that's going to show up too. You can't tell which is which unless you send it off. So the company that I use and recommend is this company. It's called CitriSafe, and they make the mold test kits that we use in the office. And you have an option with these kits. You can either just do them and not send them off, which is the least expensive way to do it, and just see, do you have a problem? And then if you do, you can take another plate and send it to the lab. I believe it's $40 a plate to analyze what grew, but don't quote me on that. But the CitriSafe website, I will put in the comments. And they have really nice mold test plates. They are very, very efficient at showing you if you have a problem. Now, the other test that I do on patients, because maybe you don't have it growing in your body, that's a good thing, but it doesn't mean that you're not being exposed to it, and being exposed to it will put a strain on your immune system and cause you some problems. So we also take the plate and then we just tap around on the clothes, all over the body, and we just do it, maybe 6 or 7 times, and we cap that up and grow that too. So let me go through what the symptoms of mold exposure are, because the lines blur between mold exposure, chronic inflammation, and fibromyalgia. So as I review the symptoms with you, you're going to see, wow, there's many symptoms that go hand in hand with these different conditions. And that really comes to a naturopathic philosophy of multiple things pulling you down, but we'll talk about that in a second. So let's talk about the symptoms. So first of all, for chronic inflammation, that would be pain, swelling, stiffness. You get up from a chair, you make a sound effect. It takes you a few steps, to get the body lubricated a little bit, to move. Or you can have more severe inflammation like arthritis, you know what I mean, bursitis, anything that has itis on the end of it, of the name, means inflammation. And so those are those symptoms. Now, fibromyalgia symptoms are those plus. So with fibromyalgia, not only do you have the inflammation, but you have extreme fatigue. You have a lot of pain. You know, you can have nerve pain, joint pain, muscle pain. You can have headache pain. You can have digestive issues. One of the key little factors I look for in saying, wow, is this potentially fibromyalgia, is I ask the person the key question: if you are tired and you go have a really good hard workout, does that make you feel better or does that make you feel worse? If it makes you feel worse, then it probably is fibromyalgia, and there's really no good diagnosis for it, but there are lots of criteria, and that's one of the ones I use. All right, now let's talk about mold, and I'm going to read these because I don't want to miss any of them. There's lots of symptoms here. So first of all, just allergy symptoms. That's what people are familiar with and think of, you know, when it comes to mold, and that really can be present. Red eyes, itchy eyes, you know, sneezing, bags under the eyes, you know, ears feeling full, all of those kinds of things. But in addition to that, also morning stiffness, joint pain, muscle pain. Well, heck, that applies to chronic inflammation and fibromyalgia too. Then we go into poor memory, poor concentration, brain fog. Those fit with fibromyalgia as well, and oftentimes with chronic inflammation. Now, one that seems a bit more specific to mold exposure is having trouble finding words. You know, like you're creating a sentence, you get the concept of what it is you're trying to say, you know it's there, and you cannot spit it out. That's very classic for mold exposure. Then we have also fatigue, which of course can go with any of the other two conditions. Weakness, just a very general weak feeling, which also goes with fibromyalgia. Let's see, headaches, light sensitivity, post-exercise fatigue, we talked about that. And then in addition, you can have neurological symptoms, like your skin can feel tingly, you can feel like you have numb places on your body, or even your equilibrium can be a little bit off. You're not really dizzy, it's not vertigo, but you just don't feel as steady. So, you know, I wasn't really planning on talking about this, but it's reminding me, mold can be behind a lot of health conditions, dementia, a lot of the neurological conditions. I was just working with a woman who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and in getting her treated for the mold, her Parkinson's symptoms are going away. And there's a lot of information in the alternative community as to, gee, what are the causes of these different neurological conditions, and are we just treating them as illnesses but not really looking at what might be behind them? So mold is definitely something to rule out. So I talked about how you can test yourself with Petri dishes. The CitriSafe website is up. Then I want to talk about why mold has become such a big problem and is so toxic. Because, you know, all of us, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, you know, all these old houses, they had mold. People didn't get so sick from it. They got allergies from it, but they didn't get sick like this. And there's very interesting facts about why that has occurred. So I'm sure all of you guys are well familiar with the fact that we now have antibiotic-resistant bacteria. You know, we have MRSA infections that are very difficult to clear up, and not even just MRSA, but it's getting harder and harder to treat with antibiotics in a lot of people. These superbugs, you know, are showing up. And the reason that we had the superbugs is because of the overuse of antibiotics, you know, in medical treatment. the overuse of antibiotics in animal feed, which a lot of times people don't even think about, and the overuse of antibiotics in like hand sanitizers, for example, which people think, oh, this is so healthy, I'm going to keep myself, clean. And there are natural hand sanitizers available. Dr. Bronner's makes a really, really nice lavender one, but the ones that have an ingredient called triclosan, those work as a pesticide and an antibiotic in the body. So we just, we think we're keeping ourselves protected from bacteria, but the bacteria are growing against these toxic influences. Well, the same thing, you guys, has happened with mold. So back in the 70s, because like I said, grandparents, great-grandparents, mold was in the environment. It was a common problem. And so DuPont had the great idea, hey, we're going to add antifungals to the paint so that these, mold situations will not grow as much. What a great thing. We're going to prevent all this stuff. So what happened then, in addition to the paint, is in agriculture. Lots and lots of crops. Corn, peanuts, I'm in Georgia. We're famous for our peanuts here. These are crops that tend to grow mold. So simultaneous with the antifungals being used in our paints, we started using antifungals on our crops to try to prevent this mold growth. And sometimes it's even used in storage facilities. You harvest grain, it's in a giant silo, it can grow mold in there. So that's why we now have these super molds that are there, and that's why people are getting, so sick from it, whereas they didn't they used to get like allergies and it was a burden to the immune system, but nothing like we have now. Now, a lot of you guys in the past have heard me mention one of my mentors. His name is Dietrich Klinghardt. He ran an experiment that was super, super controversial that actually I couldn't find today when I was looking for it. It might be my search engine, you know what I mean? I use ones that are a little more private, but I couldn't find it, and it used to be just readily available. But he took mold in a petri dish, just like I'm talking about here, grew mold, and put it next to an electromagnetic field. I believe it was a Wi-Fi. So he and another colleague studied how fast does mold grow regularly. And then his theory is that mold becomes also more toxic and more resistant when it's exposed to electromagnetic fields. So he did this experiment and they clocked how fast it took the mold to grow, and it grew exponentially faster. So there you go. Regardless of whether you believe Klinghardt or not, you definitely know we've got the antifungals being used just like we use the antibiotics and created these superbug bacteria. We have super fungus molds now. All right, so now that I've given you that good news, I want to tell you that it's not just the mold. There is something called a mycotoxin, and you may have heard this word. So mycotoxins grow on mold spores. So mold grows in what's called hypha. They're like these stringy looking things, right? But they produce spores, which are like the seeds to, get taken in the wind or on your clothes or whatever and spread elsewhere, for the mold to survive. And so on these spores are what's called mycotoxins. And I'm not going to get into all the names. I'll tell you, if you look up Dr. Shoemaker, surviving mold, if you do a search on those terms, you're going to find all kinds of information about the specific kinds of mycotoxins. But that's a lot of what makes us sick. So if you have mold in the environment, the spores have mycotoxins, and the fragments of mold have mycotoxins. So let's say you have a carpet that you have tested, or it's just really old and you think, it's time to replace this thing. It smells kind of musty. I need to get rid of it. And you go rip that carpet out. Well, you're spreading spores and fragments of mold all over the place. We used to think that Clorox was the way to clean mold, and now we know, hey, it doesn't. You can actually spread these mycotoxins, these mold fragments, when you kill it that way. So anyway, you can get these mycotoxins into your environment, and then you ingest them. Either you breathe them in or you swallow them as, just a part of breathing or something like that. And now they're in your body and they make you very sick. So it's not just black mold. Black mold was the first, I think, recognized, oh my gosh, this is a disease causing fungus, but there are many, many kinds of mold that can cause disease. Lots of them, the most aggressive ones and the ones that are the biggest problem, come from water damage. So, I mentioned I've been testing my clients for 2 years now. We test their nasal swab and cough, and we tap on their clothes and just see if anything grows. And I've had people that just, my house is new, I just did this, there's no way there's mold in my house, and we find it. Then when we find it on their body, then we use the Petri dishes to just kind of narrow down where might this be coming from. So they put them in different rooms of the house and test there. So I'm just going to give a couple of examples. So there was one client and her family members had different problems. For her, it was really heavy fatigue. For her daughter, it was failure to grow. She wasn't growing as much as she should, her young daughter. For the son, it was heavy allergy symptoms. And so I did the mold test, on these kids. We found the mold. So then they're going through and testing their house. Turns out that the new carpet that they had just had put in, less than 6 months before, was the source of the mold. Well, how does that happen? I had that happen to me one time when I moved into a home that had had new carpet laid, and I could smell, I thought, ooh, I got to test this carpet. Sure enough, a bunch of mold grew. It turns out that sometimes in these storage facilities where rolls of carpet are stored, you can get mold in the carpet there. So I had another patient who I found mold on her young son, and they went home and they said, this woman is a quack. There is no way there's mold in our house. It's very pristine. There's no problem. And so they looked, and long story short, they had had a new refrigerator many months before, and the ice maker wasn't properly hooked up. Now, this is a horror story. They are very rarely this bad, but it can happen, and you need to know about it. That ice maker line had been leaking into a wall all this time. And so they had mold all the way up the wall. It had gotten into the ceiling, and it had gotten into some ductwork. Now that one was an expensive cleanup, but most of the time they're not a super expensive cleanup. But mold can, it's been associated with many, many chronic degenerative diseases, including cancer. So it's one of those things that you want to find out. It's better to know it than not know it, and then take some steps to handle it. And I can definitely help with that. If you want resources to, I posted the CitriSafe, but there's also resources for natural mold sprays that you can use and things you can do in your own environment to clean it up. Now, once you have cleaned it up, then we have to go, okay, what if you've been around this for a while and it is causing the kinds of symptoms that I mentioned earlier? And for people just joining, I want to just quickly relay those. So symptoms of mold exposure: morning stiffness, joint pain, poor memory and concentration, brain fog, difficulty finding your words, fatigue, weakness, headache, light sensitivity, more extreme fatigue after exercise, and then skin sensations, tingling, numbness with the skin. Those are all symptoms of mold. And also you can have like a little bit of a balance problem. It's not really as severe as vertigo, but you just don't ever quite feel like, whoa, I'm steady. And so because mold is a neurological toxin, it can cause all of those things. So if you have it, and you clean it out of your environment, then it's important to clean it out of your body. And that's where eating a clean diet comes in. The bad news about this is that sugar feeds the heck out of it. So all the sugar and carb addicts out there, I'm so sorry, but you got to go on a lower carb, low sugar diet. I can give you more information in a different stream. That's a little bit of a different subject matter, but it can be cleaned out of your body. A lot of the over-the-counter products that clean up candida, because candida is a fungus, can also work on mold. But it's important to get these things in the right order, because let's say you go buy a candida product and you start taking it. If you're not binding those mycotoxins that you're releasing, killing these, fungus, organisms in your body, if you're not binding with those mycotoxins and excreting them, you're going to do way, way worse, and you're not going to feel good, and it's really not healthy for you to do that. So you have to use what's called binders. These are things that will kind of be like a sponge to absorb these mycotoxins so you can eliminate them. The two most common binders are clay and charcoal, and those are super easy to find over the counter. And then I posted about Dr. Shoemaker earlier. He uses medications, and he's got a whole protocol to treat mold, but there are natural substances that will do the same things that his prescription meds do if you don't want to do that. So to recap, you got to know. You got to know if it's in your environment. And even if there's only one family member that's showing symptoms, it's beneficial to test and just be sure that there's nothing there. You can order the mold plates from CitriSafe. I'm going to give you our office number if you want help with instructions on how to do this. My staff, after 2 years of this, are experts in talking you through it, so we can help you to know how to mold test your house. I'm also going to give you my direct email. It's Debra MacND@gmail. Oops, and I am writing that incorrectly. gmail.com. There you go. I keep trying to spell and talk at the same time. It never works. And then finally, my big announcement is that I have now a program that I'm going to release in May. There are several ways you can do this program. It's going to be a digital download, do-it-yourself program that you can just follow along at home. There's 8 modules of the 8 pillars that you need to do to get rid of chronic inflammation and fibromyalgia for people who suffer from those conditions. It will also relate to a lot of other health conditions, but I'm focusing on fibromyalgia and chronic inflammation. If you're not a follow it yourself at home kind of person, then I have 2 ways that you can be helped virtually. So I will be available for one-on-one health coaching once every 2 weeks for an hour through a Zoom conference. And I'm going to set up groups, because not everyone can afford one-on-one consultations, but that's okay. The information is the information. I'll do a Zoom conference. I'll present the information. Multiple people can sign up for it, so the cost goes way, way down. And then we'll have a question and answer. So if something is not clear, participants will be able to feedback and ask questions and so forth. So that DebraMacND@gmail.com, or you can private message me here. Those are the ways to get information about the program that's going to be released in May. So once again, I really, really appreciate you guys being here. Share this out with anybody that you feel like could benefit from it. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. I'm here almost every Thursday at 12:30. Last week was my birthday, so I took that one off, but like clockwork, almost every Thursday, and I really appreciate it. Okay, talk to you guys later. Have a great week.